The model home was quiet that Friday morning. Too quiet. It was April 8th, 2011 in West Des Moines, Iowa, a city where nothing like this was supposed to happen. A place of wide sidewalks, good schools, and neighbors who still waved from their driveways. A city where people trusted each other, where a young woman could walk into an empty house alone and feel completely safe. Ashley Okland felt safe that morning. She had every reason to. She was 27 years old, bright-eyed, and ambitious, a real estate agent who had already carved out a name for herself in the competitive Iowa housing market. She loved her job. She loved the hustle of it, the open houses, the handshakes, the moment when a young couple finally found the home they'd been dreaming of. To Ashley, real estate wasn't just about properties. It was about people. It was about helping someone plant roots. That Friday, she was at a model townhouse in a brand new development, the kind of place that smelled like fresh paint and possibility. She was there to show the unit, to smile and answer questions, and maybe help someone take the first step towards something new. It was a perfectly ordinary morning assignment. But nobody knew that Ashley Okland would never walk out of that building alive. Let's go back to the beginning. Because to understand what happened inside that model home, you need to understand who Ashley Okland was, and you need to understand the world she was working inside. Ashley was a West Des Moines girl. She had grown up surrounded by cornfields and community, and the kind of Midwestern warmth that doesn't ask for anything in return. People who knew her described her as magnetic, the kind of person who made you feel like you were the only one in the room. She was driven, she was kind, she was someone who had the whole world ahead of her. She had joined the real estate industry young and thrown herself into it completely. By 27, she was already a recognizable face in Des Moines real estate circles, reliable, enthusiastic, and deeply professional. She worked for a reputable agency, handled her clients with care, and had earned a reputation as someone you could count on. On April 8, 2011, that reputation had brought her to a model townhouse in a new development being built by a company called Rotland Homes. It was a standard showing assignment. Walk in, prep the space, greet whoever came through, answer questions. Simple. Routine. The kind of thing Ashley had done dozens of times before. Rotland Homes was the developer behind the project, a company that had been active in the Iowa market for years. They had their own staff on site, employees who were familiar with the development, familiar with the schedule, familiar with the comings and goings of the project. One of those employees was working nearby that Friday morning. And then, sound. A commotion from inside the model unit, something that didn't belong, something that made the employees stop and look up. They went to investigate. What they found inside that model townhouse changed everything. Ashley Okland was on the floor. She had been shot, twice. The space that had been designed to feel like a dream home, with its clean lines and open floor plan and the promise of a future, had become a crime scene. The employee called 911 immediately. Emergency services responded within minutes. Ashley was rushed to Methodist Medical Center in Des Moines. The medical team fought for her, but the wounds were too severe. Ashley Okland, 27 years old, full of life and plans and the kind of quiet ambition that builds something real, died from her injuries. West Des Moines would never be the same. The police were on the scene almost immediately, and from the moment they stepped inside that model home, they knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was not random. This was not a robbery gone wrong. There was no sign of a struggle over a purse or a phone. There was no evidence that anything had been taken. Ashley had been targeted, specifically, deliberately. But why? That question would haunt the investigation for 15 long years. In the immediate aftermath, detectives worked the scene with precision. They canvassed the surrounding area, they interviewed everyone connected to the development, they collected evidence, they followed leads. And yet, every trail seemed to go cold. Every promising thread seemed to unravel before it led anywhere solid. The case drew national attention almost immediately. A 27-year-old realtor shot dead in a model home in broad daylight in one of the safest cities in Iowa. The story was devastating. The randomness of it, or at least what seemed like randomness, made people terrified. If this could happen to Ashley, it could happen to anyone. Real estate agents across Iowa began taking precautions. Industry organizations started developing safety guidelines. Ashley Okland's name became synonymous with a very specific kind of vulnerability, the professional who walks into empty spaces alone, trusting that the world means them no harm. And through it all, Ashley's family waited. They held vigils, they gave interviews, they kept her memory alive with the fierce, aching persistence of people who refused to let a life be forgotten. They waited for answers that did not come. Days became weeks, weeks became months, months became years. The case went cold. But here is the thing about cold cases. They are not dead cases. They are sleeping cases. And sometimes, something wakes them up. The West Des Moines Police Department never closed the file on Ashley Okland, never stopped turning it over, never stopped asking the questions that still didn't have answers. There were detectives who had worked the original investigation who still thought about it, still carried it, still woke up at night, replaying what they knew, searching for the thread they might have missed. As Assistant Police Chief Jody Hayes would later say, Ashley's story kept many of them awake at night, revisiting the details over and over in their minds, searching for that missing piece that would tie everything together and lead them down the right path. Those words carry weight because they tell you something important. This wasn't a department that filed the case away and moved on. This was a team of people haunted, obsessed, committed. And then something shifted. We don't know exactly when the breakthrough came. Police have been careful, deliberately careful, about what they've revealed publicly. Court documents in the case do not include a probable cause statement. The detectives, at a press conference announcing the indictment, declined to share the specific evidence that cracked the case open. They are protecting their prosecution. They are protecting their case. But what we do know is this. At some point, the investigation turned its focus toward a woman named Kristen Ramsey. At the time of Ashley Okland's murder in April 2011, Kristen Ramsey was 38 years old. She worked for Rutland Homes, the same company that was developing the townhouse where Ashley was killed. Her role? Administrative assistant and sales manager. She was embedded in the very organization behind the model home. She knew the project. She knew the schedule. She knew, in all likelihood, exactly who was going to be in that unit on April 8, 2011. Think about that for a moment. This was not a stranger. This was not someone who wandered in from the street and picked Ashley at random. Kristen Ramsey worked for Rutland Homes. She was part of the infrastructure of that development. She had access, she had knowledge, she had proximity. But nobody, at least not publicly, not officially, had pointed a finger at her for 15 years. Kristen Ramsey, by most outward appearances, seemed like a completely unremarkable person. Her criminal record? A single speeding ticket from 2001, one speeding ticket in over 2 decades. She had been married since 1995. She had worked at Rutland for approximately 14 years at the time of the murder. She was, by every visible measure, an ordinary woman leading an ordinary life. And then Rutland Homes collapsed. Later in 2011, the same year Ashley was killed, Rutland shut down. The company dissolved, sold off its assets, another developer moved in and absorbed its Iowa operations. The people who had worked there scattered, moved on, rebuilt their professional lives elsewhere. Kristen Ramsey landed at a company called Midland Title and Escrow. She became a title officer. A title officer, someone who works in the background of real estate transactions, making sure the paperwork is clean, the ownership is clear, the deal can close. Someone who continued, in a way, to orbit the same industry where Ashley Okland had worked, the same world. And here is where the story takes a turn that feels almost incomprehensible. Midland Title and Escrow, the company where Kristen Ramsey would spend the next decade and more of her professional life, had corporate ties to Iowa Realty, the same agency that had employed Ashley Okland at the time of her death. Two women, separated by a gunshot in 2011, reunited, at least in the corporate sense, by the industry they both worked in. For years, without anyone connecting the dots publicly, Kristen Ramsey worked in a world intertwined with the memory of Ashley Okland. What happened next shocked everyone. In March 2026, 15 years after Ashley's body was found on the floor of that model home, an Iowa grand jury handed down an indictment. The target? Kristen Ramsey, now 53 years old. The charge? First-degree murder. First-degree murder. Not manslaughter, not second degree, first degree, which carries with it the implication of premeditation, planning, intent, the deliberate decision to take a human life. The arrest sent shockwaves through Des Moines, through the real estate community, through everyone who had followed this case for a decade and a half, and in their most private moments, begun to wonder if justice would ever come. West Des Moines police held a press conference. Assistant Police Chief Jody Hayes stood before the cameras and reporters and chose his words with the gravity the moment deserved. He spoke about an unrelenting pursuit of justice. He acknowledged what so many in his department had privately carried for 15 years, the weight of an unsolved murder, the face of a 27-year-old woman, the family that had been waiting. Midland Title and Escrow released a statement. They said that Kristen Ramsey had joined the company several months after the events of 2011, carefully distancing themselves from any suggestion that they had knowingly employed someone connected to the crime. They called themselves stunned. Along with everyone in the community, they said, they were understandably stunned. Her name was removed from the company website the same day the indictment was announced. Ramsey's attorneys moved quickly. They appeared before a judge and argued that her $2 million bond was excessive. They made the case that their client was not a flight risk. They offered concessions, a GPS monitor, a curfew, the surrender of her passport. They pushed to have the bond reduced to $100,000. And in the background of all this legal maneuvering, a single devastating reality stood still and waited for its moment in court. Because what we do not yet know, what the public does not yet know, is why, the motive, the thing that sits at the center of this story and refuses to show itself. What happened between Kristen Ramsey and Ashley Okland? What could possibly have driven a woman with one speeding ticket on her record to allegedly walk into a model home and shoot a 27-year-old real estate agent twice? They worked in overlapping worlds. They were connected, at least professionally, through Rotland homes. Did they know each other? Did they have a conflict that never surfaced publicly? Was there something buried inside the corporate machinery of that development company that has still not been fully excavated? Police aren't saying, not yet. And that silence, that careful, strategic silence, is both understandable and maddening, because this case has always been defined by silence, by the things that weren't said, by the answers that never came when Ashley's family needed them most. Kristen Ramsey is scheduled to be arraigned in April 2026, 15 years and 1 month, almost to the day, after Ashley Okland was shot in that model home. The wheels of justice, as they say, grind slowly, but sometimes they do grind. Let's sit with that for a moment. 15 years. Think about what 15 years means. Ashley Okland would be 42 years old today. She would have had a decade and a half of life, of deals closed and relationships built, and maybe a family of her own, maybe a house of her own, maybe a whole architecture of living that we can only imagine now. She would have seen the real estate industry transform. She would have navigated a pandemic. She would have watched technology remake the way people buy and sell homes. She would have grown. None of that happened because on an April morning in 2011, someone allegedly decided that Ashley Okland's future was theirs to erase. And for 15 years, the people who loved Ashley carried that absence everywhere they went, every holiday without her, every milestone she wasn't there to see, every morning when the grief settled back in before the day had even started. Her family held on. They kept showing up. They kept asking the questions that had no answers and refusing to accept that the silence was permanent. That kind of endurance, the endurance of people who love someone who has been taken violently and without explanation, is one of the most brutal things a human being can be asked to sustain. And now, at last, there is a name, there is a charge, there is a court date. There is, for the first time in 15 years, the possibility that the truth will finally be told out loud in a room with a judge and a jury where it cannot be buried again. The investigation that led here was described by police as an unrelenting pursuit. That phrase matters because it tells you something about what this case meant to the people who worked it. There are cases that get solved quickly. There are cases that fall to the bottom of a pile. And then there are cases like this one, cases that lodge themselves into the conscience of the people working them, that refuse to let go, that pull investigators back again and again, even when the trail seems impossibly cold. Ashley Okland was that case for the West Des Moines Police Department. And somewhere in the machinery of that long, grinding, unrelenting investigation, somewhere in the DNA databases and the digital records and the interviews revisited and the evidence re-examined with fresh eyes, something finally clicked into place. Something pointed clearly and irrefutably toward Kristen Ramsey. We will learn more. The trial will come, and with it, presumably, the evidence that convinced a grand jury to indict, the motive that has been kept so carefully under wraps, the specific chain of events that allegedly led from whatever existed between these two women to those two gunshots inside a model home on a quiet Friday morning. Justice moves toward a reckoning. But even before that reckoning arrives, even before a verdict is read and the full story is finally told, one thing is already true. Ashley Okland has not been forgotten. She has never been forgotten. Not by her family, not by the detectives who stayed up at night with her story turning over in their minds. Not by a community that put her face on flyers and kept her name alive for a decade and a half. And not by the industry she loved. Real estate agents across the country still talk about Ashley. Her case changed how agents think about safety, how they approach showings, how they communicate their locations, how they protect themselves in the spaces they walk into alone. Her death prompted reforms. It prompted conversations. It prompted entire organizations to reconsider what they owed to the people doing the work. That is not the legacy Ashley Okland would have chosen, but it is a legacy nonetheless. A life that ended far too soon, rippling outward through time in ways that have protected other people who will never know her name. Kristen Ramsey will face a jury. She will have the right to mount a defense. The American legal system will do what it does, slowly, imperfectly, but with the weight of consequence behind it. And somewhere, Ashley Okland's family will sit in that courtroom. They will listen. They will wait, again, one last time, for the thing they have been waiting for since April 8, 2011, the truth. For 15 years, a model home in West Des Moines has stood as a symbol of something broken, a door that was walked through and never walked back out of, a life that was stopped in a space designed to represent beginnings. But this story isn't over. It has never been over, because Ashley Okland deserved justice, and the people who refused to stop looking, the detectives, the family, everyone who kept her name in the light, they refused to let the world forget that. Sometimes the cold case warms again. Sometimes the missing piece is finally found. Sometimes, after 15 years of silence, The truth decides it's ready to be heard. Ashley Okland was 27 years old. She walked into a model home on a spring morning with her whole life ahead of her. She deserved to walk back out.